Thanks, dear viewers, for joining us on this edition of the news on Equinoxe Television, live from our headquarters in Cameroon's economic capital, Douala. I am Badle Jonathan, and in our top stories in this edition of the news, 6 persons killed by lightning in the Banguren and 2 others killed by a landslide in Fumban in the west region of the Republic of Cameroon. Bringing to you details in this newscast, and we'll also take you into the depth of the what is today known as the Takam affair, the Cameroonian who killed his wife and committed suicide in the United States of America. And we'll also be talking about the new president of Burundi who has been sworn in. Once more, thanks for joining us today, and we're beginning in the west region of the Republic of Cameroon. In the Banguren, 6 persons have been killed by lightning and 2 others killed by a landslide in Fumban. Immaculate Fogwe reports.
The population of Banguren in the Nun Division, west region of Cameroon, are in shock following the death of 6 persons struck by lightning while taking part in a burial ceremony in the village. Among the 10 victims, 4 were severely injured and are currently receiving treatment. We were attending a burial when suddenly lightning struck dead 6 persons with 4 others severely injured. We are in shock. Such a thing has never occurred in the family. According to family members, the 6 persons who died are internally displaced persons coming from the northwest and southwest region of Cameroon. In Fumban, still in the Nun Division, a woman in her 20s and her 8-year-old son have been killed by a landslide. According to local sources, they were buried by a huge landmass that fell on their building. They were extracted by members of the Red Cross. 2 other children, one 8 months old and the other 6 years old, were found alive. The heavy rains recorded in the area has been blamed for the unfortunate incidents.
Video that went viral on the internet, released by some Cameroonians in the diaspora, has uncovered a network of Cameroonian passport trafficking involving top government officials. They have promised to bring down the network no matter the top officials involved, regardless of the top officials involved. For me, I'm Strong Sander.
Il faut pas dire 300 € après avoir payé les timbres.
The viral video done in a street in the French capital city, Paris, promises to bring down top Cameroonian regime heavyweights in an uncovered passport scandal.
Nous sommes devant une société légalisée. Une société qui a été légalisée, qui a reçu l'agrément des autorités camerounaises de l'ambassade.
We are in front of a private enterprise in Paris, which is said to have been authorized by some officials of the Cameroonian embassy in France to offer Cameroonian passports. They have been given access to documents of Cameroonians at the Cameroonian embassy in France. Between May 28 and June 5th, this enterprise has sent a total of 50 documents to Cameroon, each for €300, equivalent to 195,000 CFA francs. Whereas Cameroonians have been suffering for over 2 years without passports. This mafia must stop.
With the determination to unmask what they qualify as a network of corrupt officials, they ask questions to the Cameroonian diplomatic officials.
Qui a signé l'agrément pour cet établissement? Qui a délivré l'agrément? Alfred Guinea.
Calling the name of Cameroon's ambassador to France, His Excellency Alfred Guinea.
Excellence Alfred Guinea. Qui a délivré l'agrément pour cet établissement?
The Patriots question who authorized the enterprise to operate in the name of Cameroon.
Monsieur le DGSN. Ils ont accès au dossier des Camerounais. Monsieur le ministre des Relations extérieures.
Presenting themselves as patriots, the individuals question why and how a private enterprise got the pass to offer Cameroonian passport within a month. whereas citizens who went through the embassy have not been able to receive their passport 2 years after.
We'll seek justice for these Cameroonians who have unjustly not been able to have their passports because they do not have the huge sum of money demanded here, or because they do not have godfathers. With me here are receipts of Cameroonians who have not been able to have their passports delivered 2 years after they applied. They suffer while others do business with what is rightfully theirs. In this enterprise, we'll find people like the former photographer of the Cameroonian embassy in France. So, are they the same people?
Above what they call the illegal and corrupt nature of the network, the Patriot denounced the abusive sum of 435 euros demanded before the acquisition of a passport through the private enterprise. That is 300 euros directly to the enterprise and the sum of 150 euros given at the Cameroonian embassy.
C'est inadmissible.
Il faut pas dire 300 euros après avoir payé les timbres.
Let the government tell us if they have given authorization for French citizens to decide the fate of passports for Cameroonians. We'll dismantle this network, irrespective of the personalities involved.
Seul réseau nous allons le démanteler.
After the embarrassing viral video, the Directorate General of National Security in Yaoundé, Cameroon, published a document promising an investigation into the matter.
Some information streaming into our studios from military sources in the northwest region of the country indicates that some of the information published by top military officials in the region with regards to the Widi Bali operation intended to put an end to separatist activities in the region are not true, and some military sources are indicating that the number of persons or separatist fighters said to have been killed by soldiers is rather equivalent to the number of soldiers who were killed in the operation that stormed, or the operation concerning Bali and Widikum in the Mezam division and Momo division in the northwest region of the country. However, this is the official information that we received from the top military officials, notably the 5th military region Commander General Ka Vale in the northwest region, as far as that operation is concerned.
Military crackdowns on pro-independence fighters in the crisis-hit northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon is gaining grounds. In the northwest region, the military has embarked on an overall offensive against separatist activities.
After Operation Bafuwa, Operation Bafutu, decided to plan operation, the operation code named Widi Bali, meaning Widikum Bali. Because as you are aware, the main supply road, Bamenda, Bali,
during the last major operation, the soldiers dislodged separatist strongholds in camps in parts of Bali and Widikum in the Mezam and Momo divisions respectively.
The results, you had 13 ambers sent to heaven. They were sent to heaven. I don't know. They were not killed. They were sent to hell. What? They were sent to hell. And a lot of equipment and material were seized from the ambers. The camps were destroyed, where they are manufacturing those IDs. And you've seen, I would like to mention that machine gun that you see there. which those guys took from our guys in 2018 at Ambo, and even killed one of our soldiers. So it was a challenge for us, for the soldiers, to take back these guns, because for those who know what is this machine gun, it's very deadly. I also have that anti-tank RPG-7.
The soldiers in the operation reportedly killed more than 10 separatist fighters and seized several weapons and equipment.
Soldiers of the Paratroopers Battalion and the Amphibious Battalion conducted a raid in the locality of Bokam near Gajakiri, and they sent to hell. Is it to hell or to heaven? What is it? We sent them to hell, right? We neutralized 11 of them, also took around 10 Dane guns. And last week also, the 53 Infantry Battalion in Wum, also conducted an operation around Zwa, and then they disrupted the main camp there and seized around 10.
Before the operation, codenamed Widi Bali, the military raided parts of Jakiri in the Boy Division and Wum in the Menchum Division. Despite widespread condemnation of the military strategy being implemented in the quest for an end to the 4-year-long Anglophone crisis, the government of Cameroon has remained determined to put an end to separatist activities in the northwest and southwest regions for a return to normalcy.
Take you into the depth of what is today known as the Takam affair. The Cameroonian who killed his wife and committed suicide in Cincinnati, Ohio State, United States of America. And we talked to a family friend who told us who Takam was, who his wife was, what happened, and what went wrong. Immaculate Fogwe. Immaculate Fogwe with that report and details, bringing to us details on the Takam affair, the Cameroonian who killed his wife and committed suicide in the United States of America after divorce that did not favor the man, and he decided to kill his wife and committed suicide also after doing that. Immaculate Fogwe.
Je m'appelle André Guissot, je suis un ami à Chris Takam et à Annie ou Nadège Takam, comme vous voudriez l'appeler.
A family friend of late Takam Chris and Nadège Takam makes stunning revelations on the personality and life of the two Cameroonians who died in tragic circumstances in Cincinnati, Ohio State, United States of America. We first asked him who they were.
Monsieur Takam était un homme intelligent, un homme passionné, un homme qui aimait.
Mr. Takam was an intelligent, passionate and loving man, a man who loved his family and was working to give the 3 children a prosperous future. I can say the same thing for Nadège. She was ambitious and hardworking. I don't remember when she had less than 2 jobs at the same time. Added to her matrimonial responsibilities, she continued with her education and became a registered nurse.
Annie était ambitieuse, travailleuse. Je vais vous donner quelques exemples seulement. Je ne me rappelle pas quand Annie avait moins de 2 boulots à la fois. J'ai lu quelque part qu'elle était une tontine et puis que toutes ses études avaient été payées par mon ami Takam et qu'il avait acheté une maison et que c'est une autre personne qui en bénéficiait.
Contrary to information circulating on the internet indicating that she used the law to seize the house bought by her husband, he says it belonged to the 2 of them.
Belonged?
La dame, elle payait ses études elle-même. J'ai des preuves.
Concerning her training, Andre So says he has proofs that she personally paid for her studies.
Le problème de mon ami Takam, c'est qu'il n'a pas pu s'adapter.
According to him, the problem of his friend Takam Chris was his inability to adapt to the responsibilities that the American society attributes to a husband, and he suffered because of that.
Malheureusement, le divorce est arrivé.
And this led to a divorce in 2018, which left indelible marks in his life.
La période des troubles, j'étais à Washington DC, je l'ai invité à venir rester avec moi. Takam a refusé. J'ai parlé avec lui 4 jours avant cet événement.
He spoke with him 4 days before he killed his wife and committed suicide.
Je ne pouvais pas imaginer qu'il en arrivait, il devait arriver là. Je vous implore aussi d'utiliser cette opportunité pour commencer à discuter.
Andre Guissot is urging Cameroonians and other Africans in the United States of America to begin discussing the problems they are facing as a result of a change of environment, problems of difficult integration into the American society and adapting to its cultural, legal and socio-economic realities.
Si on le fait,
Immaculate Fogwe reporting there. And there's a legal expert joining us from the United States of America, and with him we're going to be looking at the American societies, some issues that concern the American society, notably as far as couples, as far as the duties and responsibility of a husband, of a wife are concerned. Barrister, you're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Babila.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Metro and Ineba Kufo. What are some of the responsibilities of a husband? We heard in that report a friend of Takam saying that he was unable to adapt to the responsibilities that the American society attributes to a husband. What are the responsibilities that the American society or the law in America attributes to a husband?
Good evening once again, Mr. Babila. I did not actually catch the question. The quality was a little bit lower. If the question was how Mr. Christopher was unable to adapt to the American culture and society.
Right, I said we had one of his friends, a family friend, in the report that was aired a few minutes ago, that he was unable, Takam Chris was unable to adapt to the responsibilities that the American society attributes to a husband. And I'm asking, what are those responsibilities and how are they different from our context here in Cameroon and the rest of the African continent?
Okay. Mr. Babila, it's actually, there is no big difference between marriage in the United States and marriage back in Cameroon. And I think where we go, there is a little bit of divergence is in terms of our cultures, where we're coming from, and how we treat women in our lives, or how we treat our husbands in our lives, and how the legal system or the cultural or traditional norms in our societies, how they protect these relationships. You have to understand that marriage is one of the oldest institutions in human life, but this is one of the most abused institutions also. And Mr. Takam, coming from a culture where I fully understand much about it, which is Cameroonian culture or African culture, I fully understand where he's coming from, but you know, these are things that, these are norms and values that we cannot import them wherever we're coming to, because we leave some of these things behind, we bring them in, while you're going into a new territory, because they themselves also have their own laws, they have their own traditions which you must adhere to. So the question now becomes, was he conflicted when he came to the United States and brought the wife later on? Or when the wife came in, there was a conflict of interest between in their relationship that they could not actually survive? That's what we have to look into. from the little bit of knowledge that I have in this particular case is he was opportune to be in the United States before the wife came. They had children. I think they had a child back in Cameroon before he left for the United States. He came in, worked hard, brought the wife, which is just normal. If you had a spouse back in your home country, you want them to join you in your new land, in your new territory, in order to reap all the advantages of marriage. But the thing is, once you bring this couple, but once you bring your spouse into a new culture, it's somehow a little bit difficult for them to readapt, because the culture back home it's a little bit slightly different from here in the United States. There are more protections here, put it that way. There are more protections here of that relationship, that marital relationship. It is not just a protection of the woman against the man, because I hear most of the times when issues like this do transpire, people say, oh no, the American system protects the woman than the man. No, it is not. It's just that they've construed their laws to protect, they give equal protection in that particular relationship.
Concretely, what are some of those differences? What are some of those major differences in terms of laws that protects the woman in a couple or in a matrimonial home in the United States and in Cameroon and other African countries? What are those differences?
For example, in the United States, there is something called, that Congress wrote, the Violence Against Women's Act, which protects any woman or a man. It's not specifically written for a woman or for the man. That particular act, if you are in a relationship, because believe it or not, cohabiting people, that's where most of the abuse comes from. If you cohabit with somebody and you feel that you are being threatened, if your life is being threatened, you call the police or you call the authorities and report that matter to them. But that's something that we rarely see in Cameroon. You might live with your spouse in a particular relationship, whether you're married or you're not married, and there is abuse in that relationship, especially in a male-dominated society. The rate of Equinoxe becomes higher because these crimes go unnoticed, because the woman herself might feel a little bit, unappreciated in that relationship, or embarrassed to even go out there and tell people that, oh, my husband is abusive, my husband is doing this. Then, family would say, no, you don't want to bring shame onto us. So these laws are not there in Cameroon, for example. They might be there, but they're not being respected. But here in the United States, as I said, the Violence Against Women Act, it was written in the 90s because the level of, male-dominated killings was a little bit higher. So they decided to write this law, because you don't take a woman into a relationship into servitude. You have to exist as co-equal partners. And if you're in a situation where you feel threatened, you call the authorities. But again, as I said, in Cameroon, I think that's something that we are missing. And if somebody leaves Cameroon or any other African country and comes here with that mentality, with that culture, you feel that you have to exhibit those tendencies, and that's where we go wrong.
How difficult it is for Africans to integrate the American society and adapt to the realities, especially the socio-cultural realities?
Yeah, Mr. Babile, I always go back, Alden once said, if you clear from your head some sort of injustice, you can build a perfect society. So I fully also believe that we grow like the Emperor Nero, if you believe it or not. He actually murdered his wife in 65 AD, Octavia. That was a long time ago. But as society evolved, people evolve and they change also. So if you come from an African country, let's say from Cameroon, and you come to the United States, I don't think it's something that it's very difficult for you to adapt. You have to look at society, you have to look at the norms, you look at how people behave, and you try to inculcate your habits and your attitudes the way it is being done. You read the laws, because there's a lot of protection. The childhood services that protect the children in the relationship, the laws that protect the woman, the laws that protect the man. So it's not something that you import your culture into a different society. You have to understand it also, that you're in a different place. The way we pray to our gods back in Cameroon, you don't pray that here. If you have a problem, you go back to your shrines. Not that they don't have shrines here, they do. You go there and you pray there, and that's it. You tell your dead spouse or your dead mother to come back and protect your people. But here, we have the laws that are written. You have to respect the laws, and you have to try to get yourself acquainted with the society. And what I encourage most of our compatriots or people of African descent or other cultural backgrounds, when they come to a new society, join your groups, your country groups, your traditional groups. They will explain to you what the culture is. They will tell you that, okay, if you hit on your spouse, that's not an issue that's tolerated. You will be arrested. If your spouse happens to call the police, you will be arrested. Especially if they come to find a bruise in your spouse's face, you will be arrested. And that would be a ground for you to go back to your home country if they find you guilty. Because, it's a crime. You don't hit somebody. You don't treat people as slaves. It's just something that you have to readapt as you get yourself inculcated in society.
I imagine that could be very difficult for some Africans, especially those who have the habit of saying, I am the man of the house. Maitre Aneneba Akufo, thanks for joining us from Atlanta in the United States of America. Before we move on,
thank you so much, sir. My pleasure.
Right, thank you. Before we move on to talking point, Germany has announced some strategies and reasons why it has flattened its COVID-19 infection curve, with normalcy gradually returning to the country, and the Federal Health Minister calls on world governments to copy from its country and move on. Details with Innocent Azing.
Germany, that has been seriously affected by the coronavirus from the beginning, says it has today clearly flattened the infection curve, and the proportion of severe cases and deaths is lower in the country than in many other countries. According to Jens Spahn, Federal Minister of Health, he sees 3 reasons why Germany is going through this crisis relatively well. The first is that the German health system was in good condition before the crisis, and everyone had full access to medical care, with an excellent network of general practitioners available to treat milder cases of COVID-19. Hospitals were able to focus on the more serious patients. The health minister's second reason is that Germany was not the first country affected by the virus, and so had time to prepare. That though they had always kept a relatively large number of available hospital beds, especially in intensive care units, they also took the COVID-19 threats seriously from the start. As a result, the country's intensive care capacity was increased from 12,000 beds to 40,000 beds very quickly. Minister Jens says Germany is home to many laboratories that can test the virus and many leading researchers in the field, which explains why the first COVID-19 rapid test was developed here. Also that in relation to this, with a population of approximately 83 million people, they were able to perform up to 1 million tests per day, and will soon have the capacity to perform approximately 5 million antibody tests per month. The health minister adds large test campaigns are likely pointing a flashlight in the dark, indicating without it you only see shadows, but with it you can see the details clearly and immediately. To the Federal Health Minister, they have been living for 2 months with severe restriction on public and private life. A response necessary and effective, with normalcy gradually returning, though consequences of the confinement cannot be ignored. While stating that Germany remains vigilant, Minister Jens advises it is essential that governments inform the public not only of what they know, but also of what they do not. He is certain this is the only way to build the confidence to fight a deadly virus in a democratic society. An example the Cameroonian government missed out. From the German example, citizens must be conscious and have the zeal to cooperate with government out of a sense of responsibility. Germany's Federal Minister of Health also suggests that for other countries to attain success, the government must supplement the information on the virus with an open public debate and a roadmap for recovery. To inform the public, government should show that they are counting on citizens to understand the situation and what it requires.
And Germany was once seen as a European coronavirus success story, but two new clusters have put authorities back on high alert. 657 new cases of COVID-19 have been recorded in a slaughterhouse in western Germany. 7,000 people have been forced into isolation and quarantine in the region. In the country's capital, Berlin, hundreds of households are back under lockdown after a spike in new infections in parts of the city, and the new clusters could be linked to easing of travel restrictions. And in Burundi, the country's newly elected president has been sworn in. Evariste Ndayishimiye was sworn in earlier today, in 2 months earlier than planned. While taking the oath of service in the administrative capital Gitega, President Evariste Ndayishimiye pledged to defend the nation's interests and unify its activities. The fast-tracked ceremony comes after his predecessor Pierre Nkurunziza died suddenly last week. Coming up next, Talking Point. Thanks for joining us in Talking Points. We are receiving a political scientist, former member of the Cameroon government, Professor Elvis Ngolengole. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Bala. It's always good to be back at Equinoxe. May you permit me to use this opportunity to express my deep condolences to the families in Banguren and Fumban that have lost loved ones as a result of the natural disasters that took place there, and at the same time to express my condolences to the children of the Takam family that just lost their mom and dad in a very sad and tragic homicide. I hope that the good Lord will take care.
All right. What's your take on the difficulties that Africans, Cameroonians and other Africans are facing in integrating the American society and its socio-cultural realities?
Yes, Mr. Babila, when I watch and I follow the story as you've reported it, I feel very, very sad because when I sit here, I'm an example of a young Cameroonian who...
You lived for several years.
I went to America as a young Cameroonian. I was barely 19 years plus. I bet you, I grew up in America. I became a man in America, and I didn't leave the United States until I was 35. So you can see, for more than 12, 13 years, I lived in America from the age of 19. I got married in the United States, and I'm still married to an American who is, and it doesn't mean that I got married in 1982 and I'm still married. So you can imagine for how many years I've been married, 38 years plus. But you see, you've just asked the question. You know, the population of the Cameroonians in the American diaspora is about estimated at somewhere between 800,000 to about 1 million, and the entire African diaspora in the United States, some statistics put it at 4 million, some others put it at 6 or 7 million. So it's a big diaspora. But what I know about the United States is that some Cameroonians or some Africans have difficulty integrating, adjusting, because the American norms, social norms are such that you must be successful, you must work hard, and you must make sure that you preserve that success. Failure is not so American. For everyone who is in America, whether you are an immigrant or a citizen,
the cultural differences between the United States, Cameroon, and other African countries seem to be a serious problem, which is not on the table of discussions.
Well, you know, American society is a society where success is considered a virtue, and hard work is a virtue, and for everyone who is there, you need to always aspire to having the American dream, and the American dream is that you have a home meaning a family, a house, or you know what you call a home, a residence, a livelihood, and that you have a job, and that you have your car. This is what you call the American dream. And everyone in America, whether you come from Africa or anywhere, you aspire to living up to that standard. Unfortunately, for some of our brothers and sisters who are in the diaspora in the US, they have difficulty adjusting to this because they come from an African society where we take a lot for granted, and we don't realize that failure or irresponsibility or indiscipline or cheating is not considered a virtue in America. And the institutions in place, the morals, the social norms in place do not allow for you to just behave anyhow. And those who have understood this, as I did, and I think as many Africans and Cameroonians in particular in the US, are successful, and they are doing good, they are doing well, they are very responsible, I mean. But those few who, for whatever reasons, cannot make it, they tend to engage in deviant behavior, illegal behavior, and sometimes irresponsible behavior, and the consequences are what we've just seen. Because in America, in the United States, neither the laws nor do the social norms permit you to take away someone else's life, even if it's your wife or it's your child, not to talk of taking your own life, because even that is a problem. That's illegal unless under certain circumstances. So when you do what Mr. Takam did, it's so un-American. It's considered to be so deviant and so unfortunate, especially when you know that 3 innocent children have been left behind without parents for reasons which are beyond their control.
Right, let's talk about the management of coronavirus by the Republic of Cameroon. The German example seemed to highlight several loopholes in government's management, and the German minister who spoke in the report said that government has to inform the people on what they know and what they do not know, and that seemed not to be happening in Cameroon. There seem to be several loopholes in government's communication strategy.
Well, actually, I'm one of those who believes that in our society, since this pandemic was announced to us in mid-March in Cameroon, I think that the state of Cameroon, through its government, has taken the charge, has taken the leadership, and has shown strong leadership. And in its communication strategies and methods and so forth, it has done its best to make sure that it manages the problem in such a way that it doesn't become disastrous. I think that Cameroon has succeeded to avoid a disaster, and thanks to state leadership through the government. Sure, the communication method, some people might argue, but I think the government has adjusted in this communication to make sure that, as you say, as you see in the case of Germany, to see that communication between the government and the people and the people and the government, that it flows very well. You know, communication is not given to everybody. You people are quite experts at it. But I think that we should look at things in a positive way. Imagine if the government had not taken the leadership it has taken, and imagine if the government had not taken the bull by the horns. When you see the head of state, the things the head of state has done, the prime minister is permanently engaging in ensuring that he leads in the government's coordination, and the Minister of Health, public health is everywhere. He's a lieutenant who, I don't know if he sleeps. We have to give credit where credit is due. I think that the state of Cameroon, and through his government, they've done quite well. Maybe in communication, some people may think you should communicate differently.
You think that the government has avoided a disaster, but some medical experts are predicting a desire if the figures continue, a disaster, I mean to say, if the figures continue rising at the same pace. We are more than 10,000 confirmed cases now.
Yeah, I mean, the disaster is that, I mean, when I say the government has prevented a disaster, I mean, Cameroon is not in the worst case basket or the worst case scenario. We have to say that our country has done quite well out of the countries that have been hit hard. Some countries have done way worse than that. And had the government not taken that leadership, with all the measures and the energies and the resources that the state of Cameroon through its government have put in place, just imagine what the head of state himself as a person has done, not to talk of other citizens and groups and so forth, the partners, what they've brought in. It has enabled us to avoid that disaster. And you say some have predicted. Yeah, there are some people who are experts in predicting doom, and especially when it comes to Africa. But I can tell you something. I know that the coronavirus pandemic has shown one thing, has demonstrated that, look, for those who have wished doom or have predicted doom or are still predicting doom, I think that the pandemic has shown that Africa has come of age, and Africa is capable of taking care of whatever challenges it faces. Because of the 54 African countries in Africa, look, apart from, let's say, places like South Africa, Egypt, and so forth, where it's a little pretty high, and they are doing quite well, trying to control it, I think that Africa is doing relatively much better than other continents. We should give credit, thanks to the leadership of the states and the governments that have shown that, yes, Africa can take a challenge and make good and succeed at it,
and solve its own problems. Let's talk about the Anglophone crisis. What do you think about the ongoing military crackdown in the northwest and southwest regions? The military trying to put an end to separatist activities, cracking down on killing the separatists, and so on. What do you think about that? Is it a good strategy? As a political scientist, is it a good strategy?
Yeah, Mr. Babel, I'm glad that you said as a political scientist, but first, I'm a human being and a citizen of Cameroon before I became a political scientist. I studied political science, international relations, but before then, I remained a citizen and a human being. You know, I'm one of those who feels very touched because this crisis has lasted almost 4 years now, and there have been a lot of loss of life and destruction. And again here, we've seen all the measures that and the determination of the head of state and his government to show openness to solving the problem, to show openness to discussing with everyone, and to give all the assurance and the resources to make sure that we change. You know, killing people is not the best way to solve a problem. And sure, you know, the role of the army, the role of the military, the role of the security in any political system, in any country, in any state in the world, is that when there is a problem that has to do with the security of human beings and their property, naturally the state, as the collective will of all the people, through its arm of its security arm, meaning the forces of law and order, will always be engaged to make sure that it protects the people and their property, and to ensure that they put a stop to terrorism or violence or extremism of any sort. This is what's happening. You've heard, I mean, you would agree with me that the head of state, through his government and the prime minister, have said time without number that the preference is dialogue of Republican nature. That means discussion, trying to find a common ground. But that doesn't stop the state from operating as a state, meaning the army will always operate, because the army, actually, these soldiers, these gendarmes, They are our brothers and sisters. They are a professional army. They are a Republican army. They are not there against people. They are there to protect people against violence and extremism.
The army is there to protect people against violence and extremism, according to Professor Elvis Ngole. In 30 seconds, Professor, what can immediately put an end to this crisis?
I think in 30 seconds, what will immediately put an end to this crisis is that that everyone should recognize that dialogue must not stop, because we're in a republic, and that for that dialogue to be meaningful, all those who have taken up arms should show from their hearts that, okay, they want to give dialogue a chance and they will not use these arms anymore. Once that happens, even the military, being a Republican force, a Republican arm of the state, the military being also citizens, because the military, they are citizens, they will understand that
the separatist fighters should drop their guns.
They should drop their guns, and the head of state has said that again and again, that they should drop their arms. And I think this is an incentive for the army, which is an army of the people, by the way, because the Republican army, to say, okay, we don't have any more reason to go after these bad boys, because they have decided to give dialogue a chance. Dialogue has already begun. You know, the Major National Dialogue, I happen to have been a participant, and the recommendations have begun already being implemented. Reconstruction has begun. I hope that everyone will understand that if we want equity and justice, we cannot get equity and justice through the arms. We can only get equity and justice through brotherly, fraternal discussions and dialogue and so forth, because we are brothers to each other. Those people are not enemies.
Professor Elvis Ngole, you are a political scientist, former Minister of Forestry. Thank you for joining us in this edition of the news on Equinoxe Television.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us. That's it for today.